Alright guys, I got a Rippaverse news video here for you today, which I've been wanting to make videos, covering big Rippaverse announcements for a while now, and it's something that I just haven't gotten around to actually doing. So I figured that now would be a damn good time to start, considering that Rippaverse just had their big Rippaveal showcase a few days ago. So this is their big presentation that they made, first one they've done, where they announced a ton of new stuff, a lot of new books that they plan on releasing in 2025 and possibly beyond. Now, they did have this presentation at the end of last week, like right in between Christmas and New Year's, which, I love you, Eric, but you can't be dropping all this cool shit on us in the middle of the holidays like that. I got too much going on that time of the year. But yeah, I am just now getting around to talking about this. But I did want to cover it since there was so many cool things that they showed during this. Some surprise announcements, some announcements for stuff that we already knew about, or at least knew of. But in total, they did confirm 14 books they plan on releasing, mostly in 2025. So this is going to be a very big year for them. So I do want to run through everything that was announced during this showcase. Not necessarily in the order that they announced it. But I did want to start with the fact that we are finally getting follow-up entries in 3 of their ongoing series, since they did confirm that we are getting ISOM number 3, Alpha Core number 2, and Yaira number 2. So these are 3 announcements that were pretty expected, but they are things that I'm really glad we're finally getting. We've had a lot of Rippaverse releases so far, but most of them have all been focused on new characters, and, they've really been prioritizing expanding the universe. But I have been left wanting with, continuations for some of the stories that we've already got invested into, especially ISOM, since ISOM 2 come out, like, in the middle of 2023. So it's been a long wait for that book. ISOM number 3 is going to be the conclusion to the Ill-Advised arc, and I have been pretty anxious to see how that story ends. So we are getting all 3 of those books this year, and they did little trailers for all 3 that sort of, gave you a little sneak peek about the content of all of them. Which, I have a link in the description to the full showcase if you want to watch the entire thing. It's about 45 minutes long. But all 3 of these did look really cool. Of course, they're all picking up where their series' previous entries all stopped. So we will get continuations for all those stories and some more content for all those characters. So I'm definitely looking forward to all 3 of those. Another continuation that they announced, which is something that we pretty much knew was happening at some point, but I didn't expect them to be talking about it already. They actually confirmed Bloodruth number 2 is in the works, which Bloodruth number 1 hasn't even released yet. The pre-orders for it are up right now. I think there's about 2 or 3 weeks left in the collection for that. I do have my stuff pre-ordered from that collection already, so I'm ready to go on it. But that book actually isn't in anyone's hands yet, so I was surprised for them to already go ahead and confirm that we are getting number 2, and give us, a little taste of the story for number 2 as well, since we got a trailer with Bloodruth talking about wanting to use some sort of forbidden magic to possibly bring some lost family members back to life. So that seems like it could be a really compelling story. Of course, it's going to be written by the Saska sisters, just like Bloodruth number 1 is. So as someone who the character of Bloodruth really stood out to the most out of all the Rippaverse characters, I'm definitely looking forward to both the number 1 and the number 2 of this series. And I am glad that it looks like it's not going to be too long of a wait before we get a continuation for her as well. Now, another announcement we got was a book that we already knew about because they revealed it a while ago, a few months I think. But we did get a little bit more on it here. They did announce that we are getting a new one-shot for a brand new character called Zaylin, What Kills Must Die. So this book is about yet another new character being introduced into the Rippaverse, which this book has more of a sci-fi, outer space sort of setting, and this character is clearly alien in origin when you look at his design. So we're getting sort of an outer space alien sci-fi sort of character in the Rippaverse, which is something different from what the other characters we've seen. I guess technically Yaira is an alien, but, she's human looking, at least. So we are expanding into another genre here. We don't know a ton about this character or about the story. We know that it is being written and illustrated by Chuck Dixon and Joe Bennett. So the same combo we know and love from Alpha Core and the Horsemen. So they are back again with another new character, which so far I've enjoyed everything I've read from Chuck Dixon, so I expect this to be very good as well. They actually had Chuck Dixon on during the showcase to talk about this briefly, and they did mention that Zaylin is going to be a very important character in a lot of the upcoming events in the Rippaverse. So I am anxious to sort of find out more about this and see how it turns out. Now, next up, we got a pair of book announcements, actually, coming from the Saska sisters, but each sister is actually splitting off to write her own book. So Jen Saska is writing one and Sylvia Saska is writing the other. And these two new books are based on Michael Copper and Lillian Ronashi, the villains that were featured in Alpha Core, and again briefly in The Horseman as well. So these are two characters that we are familiar with, but we actually know very little about. We know pretty much next to nothing about their power sets, other than they can both do the glowy eyes thing, and Lillian can manipulate some kind of purple energy with her hands. So these books appear to be some sort of origin story for both of them. The one focused on Lillian Ronashi is called The Cursed, and it's being written by Jen Saska. And the one focused on Michael Copper, being written by Sylvia Saska, is called The Black Eye Club. So both of these seem pretty intriguing. I am interested in both these. I do want to find out a lot more about these characters, since, we've seen quite a bit of them, but we know very little. So getting some more hard info on their power sets, on where they come from, on, what their ultimate goals are, what their plans are, all of that would be very nice to get in these books. Especially for Michael Copper, which, I talked before in my Alpha Core #1 video that I wasn't really super impressed with how they handled Michael Copper's character in that book. So I definitely want to see some more of him, because he seems like that kind of character that could be really interesting. But based on what we've got of him so far, he has yet to grab me. So hopefully this book can get that job done. And then, of course, Lillian Ronashi has always been an interesting character to me. So getting some more of her is going to be very, very cool as well. If you've followed this channel for a while, I have an affinity for Asian women. So I am definitely looking forward to both these books. I think both of them will be very interesting reads. So next up, we also got an announcement for a new limited series that they're going to be releasing, focused on Norfrika, which are two characters that appeared way back in ISUM #1, right at the tail end, and we haven't seen buttfuck anything of them since. So we are finally getting something new on Norfrika, which I know is something that a lot of people have been begging for a long time. But they are getting a limited series called Norfrika Glorious Death. So we don't know how many issues this is going to run for, but, they're making it clear that it is limited, so it's not going to run forever. So it should be a more focused story. It is going to be written by Eric July, founder of the Rippaverse, with artwork done by Ronaldson Friere. I apologize if I butchered the pronunciation of that name, but based on what little we've seen, the artwork does look very nice. So again, this is two characters that we've seen a little bit of, but know next to nothing about. So it will be very nice to finally find some info about them as well. We know that they have some sort of power sets based on their brief appearance in ISUM 1, and they have almost like a godlike aura to them. So I think this one could be very intriguing to see what sort of direction they take this. It seems to be more of a sort of mystical genre, as opposed to, sci-fi or horror or some of the other genres that the Rippaverse has dabbled in so far. So this is one that has been very highly anticipated by the fans. So hopefully we'll finally get our hands on that soon and find out about Norfrika. So beyond that, we did also get confirmation of something that, again, was pretty expected by a lot of people. but it is something that personally made me very happy to finally see get confirmed, because they announced that the two characters who received short stories in the 2 issues of the Rippaveal, so Savage P.I. and Saoirse, both of them are going to be getting full book releases. So Salvage is going to be getting a one-shot graphic novel called Salvage Lethal Force. And then Saoirse is actually going to get an ongoing series with the release of Saoirse #1, with both of these books being written by Eric July, just like the short stories were in the Rippaveal. So this announcement personally made me pretty happy, since I did really enjoy both Salvage and Saoirse, especially Saoirse, so I am glad that she's going to have her own ongoing series. So I am looking forward to seeing more out of both of those characters. I was actually just talking about wanting to, see some more Saoirse content in my last video, which, I just recently put up my Horseman and Rippaveal #2 video not that long ago, which I actually recorded that video right before the showcase happened. So, of course, right after I record something, we get a ton of news. But yeah, I am really happy that we're going to be getting both those books. Those are definitely, immediate pickups for me. They both will be continuing the stories that started in the Rippaveals as well. So, if you got invested into the little short plot in those stories, they will be getting fully fleshed out in these books. So, definitely a lot to be looking forward to there. When speaking of the Horseman video I just did, we also got confirmation that the Horseman is getting his own ongoing series as well, starting with the Horseman #1, again by the duo of Chuck Dixon and Joe Bennett, just like his one-shot was. So, if you saw that video I just put up, you will know that I absolutely loved the Horseman, Welcome to Flores Park. I love the Horseman as a character, so I am really glad that he's getting his ongoing book. There's definitely a lot of potential there for stories to tell with him. We talked about how at the end of that book, spoiler alert, his identity was found out by the Alpha Corps. So since he's obviously getting back into the vigilante game, there's going to be a very clear conflict there between them. We still have no resolution to the whole story about, whoever was after him in Drescher, which is why he moved to Flores Park in the first place. So we may see some more of whoever sending those weird ninja guys after him. So there's definitely a lot of cool things they can do with that character. So I am absolutely looking forward to that, and I would definitely be picking that up as soon as it becomes available. Now, this next announcement was something a little bit more vague. It sounds like this one is a little bit further in the future. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't end up seeing any of this until 2026, maybe. But they did confirm that Mike Baron is working on some new projects for the Rippaverse, which of course he was the writer for Gooding the Polymath. And they did confirm that he is working on some more Gooding content, as well as something called Delta Base, which they didn't really make clear what that was. He talked about it a little bit in the video, and it sort of sounded like it could be some sort of villainous equivalent to the Alpha Corps. So that could definitely be something intriguing. Again, we know very little details about this. We don't even know what Delta Base exactly is. We don't know if the Gooding thing is going to be an ongoing series or if it's going to be another one-shot. We pretty much don't know anything about this other than Mike Baron is working on it. So that definitely seems like something for further out in the future, but when we get some more details about that, I'll be sure to cover it as well. So then they had what was, to me at least, the biggest announcement of this showcase. This is the thing that jumped out to me the most out of all these announcements. They announced another new limited series that's going to be written by Chuck Dixon, focused on the Great War of Separation, which this is a big event in the universe of the Rippaverse, which is something that has been sort of mentioned in passing in a lot of the Rippaverse books. It's something that we don't have a ton of direct details on. We know that in this universe that Texas is basically its own country now. It is broken away from the United States, and apparently the rest of the United States has been fractured into, different smaller countries as well. But we've only gotten little tidbits about this, little breadcrumbs here that we've kind of had to piece together. Of course, we know that in Alpha Corps, they talked about Brian Solari being the hero of this war. It was mentioned several times in Gooding the Polymath. We heard a little bit about the greater world, outside of Flores Park in that book, since it sounded like the Four Corners area has basically become its own country as well, and how Four Corners and Texas both didn't acknowledge Argentina for some reason. So, there's a lot of mystery surrounding this, but it is definitely something that's very interesting to me, at least. So, this book is going to be a full-on origin story and explanation for that entire War of Separation period. So, we're going to get to see Brian Solari in action back then. We're going to find out, what led to the war. We're going to find out what happened in the war. We're hopefully going to find out a lot more about, the current status of the world and, maybe a full map of, what all the different countries that the U.S. has split into now. So this is a thing to me that just definitely jumped out as probably being my most interesting thing that they showed in this entire showcase. Which the artwork for this book is going to be done by Jack Herbert, and the art looked absolutely amazing from what we saw. They didn't show a ton, but they did show several new characters, none of which were named. We, of course, saw Brian Solari, in a different outfit from when he was back then, obviously prior to the Alpha Corps existing. We also saw an image of a family, which they didn't say who this was, but it looks like to me that this could be Avery and Altona, back when they were kids, along with their parents. So this could be the Silman family. So we might actually get into the origins of Isom in this as well, back when he was a child. So like I said, this is going to be a limited series. We don't know how many issues it's going to go for, but this thing should be an absolute lore gold mine as far as, info on the world and, the history of everything that's happened in this universe. So, out of everything they announced, this is probably the thing I'm looking forward to most of all, and I absolutely cannot wait to get my hands on this. So, hopefully it comes out very soon. We don't have any exact release dates for any of this. But yeah, hopefully we get this as soon as possible. So, that was it as far as new content goes. Now, they did talk about one more thing, which we already knew about, which is actually a re-release of sorts, because they are coming out with their first sort of trade paperback release. They're coming out with the Rippaverse Trinity, Volume 1. So this is a collected works sort of deal. This is a big 300-plus page book that collects Isom number 1, Alpha Core number 1, and Yaira number 1, all into one big release. So, the first entries into the 3 big ongoing series for the Rippaverse, which they also mentioned that the Isom portion of the book has been remastered. So they've sort of touched up some of the artwork on it and redid the lettering and sort of made some improvements on the Isom portion. I think the Alpha Core and Yaira portions are just exactly as their individual releases were. But this is a cool thing to release. They actually already have the pre-orders for it up. They're releasing it in both softcover and hardcover, with the softcover being $45 and the hardcover being $85. Which this is something to me that I would kind of like to have for my collection, but I'm probably not going to bother with, at least for right now, since I already own all 3 of those books separately. It's not really any new content to me. And, I may or may not have went a little crazy on some Black Friday sales and don't necessarily have the money to blow on a book that I already own right now. So, yeah, I'm probably going to not fool with this, at least for right now. I know the hardcover version of this book is only going to be limited to 1,000 copies. And I think the pre-orders for it close at the end of this week. By the time I get this video up, they might already be closed, because I got some other stuff I got to get up first. But anyway, the hardcover is going to be going away soon. The paperback should be available, anytime going forward. So this seems like a pretty cool release, and I'm glad that they are sort of getting into the trade paperback collected works sort of deal, since that is something that I have a lot of interest in, for other comic book series. But since I already own all these individual releases, it's something that I'm personally not going to probably bother with, at least for right now. although if you're new to the Rippaverse and you want to get all three of those books, this would be a cost-effective way to pick up all three at once if you want to get a taste of the main three series going on in this universe right now. So that was pretty much it for the Rippaveal showcase. Now there is one more thing I do want to talk about in this video here, which they didn't feature this in the showcase at all. It's something that they announced a long time ago, and I just haven't, had a chance to mention it in any of my other videos, so I did want to talk about it here. They are coming out with another very cool statue to go along with the $500 Yaira statue that they announced before, which is something that I did discuss in my Yaira video previously. But they are also now releasing a young ISOM statue. So this one isn't from McFarlane like the Yaira statue was. This one is being made by Iron Studios, and it is a 1/8 scale resin, metal, and polystone statue. And it's based on ISOM back from before he retired the first time, specifically his appearance on cover D of ISOM number 2. So this is another very nice high-grade, collector's statue. They are only making 500 copies of this statue, so it is a very limited release. And this one is actually significantly cheaper than the $500 that the Yaira statue was. This one's only $275, but that's still pretty drastically out of my price range, unfortunately. I've talked before, I've spent a pretty penny on some figures before, but I've never crossed into that range, and I don't really see myself crossing into it right now, unless I, fall ass backwards into some money or something. So, unfortunately, just like the Yaira statue, this is something that I would absolutely love to have, but most likely I'm not going to end up getting my hands on. So, don't be expecting any, review videos or anything for that statue coming from this channel. However, I do plan on picking up pretty much every book that they announced in this Rippaveal showcase, and I will be covering all those books as I get my hands on them. So, I will have a ton of Rippaverse content coming on this channel. They did mention that a lot of these books are going to be a lower page count and, have a lower price point to go along with them, since they are obviously drastically increasing their release schedule. So I expect them to, sort of be maybe the length of Gooding the Polymath, maybe sort of in that 70 or so page range, as opposed to the 90 or 100 page range that some of the other books have been. So if we get a more steady release schedule, with each book maybe being, about 70 or so pages, and costing around the same price point as Gooding, so, that $18 to $21 range for the, basic covers, I could definitely get on board with that. I think that would be reasonable. My wallet has been sort of cowering in the corner ever since I watched this showcase, since it knows it's in for a beating with me picking up all these books. But yeah, if they go with that sort of, release schedule of the future with things coming out regularly, but with each book being slightly shorter and slightly less price, I think that'd be a really good sort of middle ground for them to land on and sort of be their standard going forward. So yeah, overall, I absolutely love this showcase. It gave me a ton of cool things to look forward to in this year and probably into next as well. I know they have most of these books slated for 2025, but I could definitely see a few of them, maybe getting pushed back into Q1 2026. We know how Yaira Winter sort of became Yaira Late Spring, so, things might happen, but I got no problem, waiting a little bit for some good content. So, yeah, I'll definitely be picking these up as they come out and covering them on this channel. Eric did confirm that they do plan on doing more of these, Rippaveal showcases in the future. So if we get some more of these soon as well, with some more announcements, I'll try to cover those as they come in as well. Which I do hope they keep up this format, because I do like this sort of, extended showcase thing, showing a bunch of new announcements. It sort of reminds me of, those video game presentations from E3. And of course, E3 has bit the bullet at this point. So having something cool like that to look forward to in the future is definitely something nice. But anyway, I guess that's all I got to say, so lots of luck to you and yours.